Good morning, campers. I've been getting a lot of shit from Spotify about intro and outro music. So from here on out, there will be no intro and outro music. There will simply be very short videos, very concise videos that address a very specific topic and move on. This is a specific propaganda point that keeps circulating, and the question is, does the state of Israel have the right to exist? Okay? I'm going to bring 2 points here. The first is the word exist. Nothing created by statute exists. It's a statutory construct, and it does not exist. This is abusive language for people who aren't thinking correctly about the nature of existence. This is like a philosophical problem or a language problem, depending upon how you're phrasing it. It's very simple. Nothing. Corporations do not exist. States do not exist. These are sock puppets. Stefan Molyneux has the best analogy I know of, and it's a corporation or a state is a sock puppet that you rob banks with. And when you get caught, the sock puppet goes to jail. Okay? So no, none of that exists. The second part is the technical part. You can go look up UN Article 2, Section 4. Does Israel have the right to exist? The answer is no, because the UN rules were adopted in 1945, and Article 2 says you can't steal someone else's land. There's a long argument about people who think the UN is a good idea or a bad idea. On any planet, you end up with something like a UN. Now, what we really have are 7 continents plus scattered islands, but the continents are the meat of the issue. And if we have, say, human trafficking happening on any one of those continents, you can go from that continent to another continent and steal people. Stealing land is called a beachhead. So the whole point is, you could go round and round about what you think about the UN, but at a certain point on a global scale, because this planet is a unit of one, certain things cannot go on at least the land mass you live on. That's all. According to the UN, Article 2, Section 4, you cannot have conquered land, and that was adopted in 1945. Israel was conquered Palestine was conquered in 1948, and the State of Israel was established. For those of you who don't understand hybrid war, fifth generation war, the invisible war, the silent war, the forever war, all of those things are the same thing. They are attorneys finding constructs, statutory constructs. Some people will refer to these as a dimension outside of time and space. Some kind of verbally abusive language that will just lead someone to believe that a statutory construct exists. And if you want to go into the real abusive language, you can go all the way into is real. It's not real, okay? It's not real, and I'll give you a very specific instance. For those of you who ever paid attention to the Pizzagate thing or the Comet ping pong incident, for those of you who think that Pizzagate is bullshit, that's fine. If you go to the Comet ping pong incident, you will find a man named James Alefantis. I'm fundamentally certain that's not his given name at birth. James Alefantis, pronounced the French way, is J'aime les enfants. That means I love the infants. Let's not get into how nasty that gets. Just to state that the verbally abusive way that people's minds will be dragged around. States and corporations will have existence when they don't. Israel isn't. It's just a state. And it was according to the UN rules. And they built on conquered land. And that is unacceptable. So, no matter where you think you're going with any of this, it's all abuse by your peers, by your peer group, other fucking humans. And you have to understand, Eric Weinstein, you know what, I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to cut a piece of Eric Weinstein here on the end. The type of people that conduct this type of warfare It's fifth generation warfare that hides behind attorneys and is basically crime because it's not military warfare. I mean, we can argue about fourth and fifth generation warfare. I just cut all the kinetic stuff cuts off at fourth. Fifth generation is statutory, economic, administrative, and psychological. And as long as you could commit that crime behind your attorney, you get away with it. And then it goes into Ghislaine Maxwell having a jurisdiction called Terra Mar in California, and it goes into Disneyland. It used to be its own nation state, and that has been reeled in. So I'm going to keep this short, and I'll put Eric on the end. No. The correct answer is no. Israel doesn't have the right to exist, and that is according to the UN Charter. So, have a good week, campers. It's all propaganda.
Now the question is peace linked to gelding, to emasculation, to devitalization? And now there's a very famous quote spoken by Orson Welles as Harry Lime in The Third Man. And I'm sure many of you who know the film know the quote I'm thinking of immediately. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. And of course, he goes on to say that in Switzerland there were 500 years of brotherly love, and they came up with the cuckoo clock. Possible moral is that radical creativity, innovation, and vitality is inseparable from violence. Violence is not necessarily a bad thing. When it comes to masculine traits, people have a very hard time finding any masculine traits that aren't also feminine traits to say a positive thing about, except apparently we are able to peace standing up. I think that another positive trait of men is that they can control their violence, and that violence can be used for protection, and that violence can be used for creativity. But we are about to go back into an era which is perhaps a very high vitality. I want to talk about a very difficult subject. And that is that the concept of actual physical emasculation has a rich history going well into the 20th century and in fact into the 21st century. One of the reasons that we've been deranged by the trans discussion is that the trans discussion is about devitalization. And it is a recurrent theme that authoritarian regimes attack the reproductive rights of their citizens. And whether this is China, in which the last eunuch died in the 90s, rather astounding. Whether we have in Italy the last castrato, who was actually recorded, and you can listen to him sing, not a very good castrato, I might add. Or Sanjay Gandhi, who triggered, in part, the reaction in India. Do we have Indians in the audience? Very disappointing. I would say to them, Sampurna Kranti Abnara Hai Bhavi Ityas Hamara Hai. Total revolution is now the slogan. That is how angry people were and how violent they became because of sterilization camps that were practiced in the 1970s. And I have this quote from Elon Musk, because I think what you have to assume is that when you go to war, one of the great terrors is that you will be disfigured. The sun also rises is a famous example. Bouncing Bettys were discussed in Vietnam. And the fact is that these people very much came for our children. This is not cute, it's not funny, it's a terrible tragedy, and I don't think that I overspeak when I call it a reproductive holocaust. I'm not going to read the quote because I don't think I can get through it personally. This child was with my son in high school, and I can tell you that the schools are infested with an orientation that is against the family, against the natural order, and against society itself. The reason that this talk changed radically at 4 a.m. is that I became aware yesterday that many of you don't know the basic terminology or framework of what you have just been through. You think you have been through the culture wars, which is some sort of cute internet conflict that seems really draining and exhausting. No, this is actually something that has recently been termed hybrid war. It's a 2007 concept from Frank Hoffman, and it says that in the current situation, non-shooting wars have no border and no end. Anything that can come through the internet means that there is no frontier. We are all combatants to the people who practice hybrid warfare. We can all be manipulated from abroad. Tokyo Rose is everywhere. And as such, you're mistaken. All of those of you who did not raise your hand that you've been through a war, you have no idea where you've been. And this is why the talk has changed. So hopefully I won't go over, but I had to change it a little bit. Cyber attacks, diplomacy, psychological attacks, information warfare. This has been discussed in the national security community, but it has not been discussed widely, which is why when we have coffee and I use these words, I see blank stares. It's important that we learn their terminology. Human terrain system. This is the concept that we can weaponize the social sciences. Cultural anthropologists, economists, psychologists can be used. We are the terrain. It is no longer the mountains of Afghanistan or the Hindu Kush that we have to map, but we have to map the actual aspects of human nature by clicks and how long you stay on a site, what you care about, what's your behavior on Pornhub. We are available as the terrain for these national security people who do not show their faces. They fight over us. And they use our social sciences and our universities to fight us as if we are simply terrain.